Hi, everybody. Welcome. Elisa here with you again this week, and I thank you for having me. I am a registered dietitian with Kelly's Choice, and I hope you enjoyed last week's webinar if you had a chance to view that. We talked about the basics of nutrition, and today we are going to talk about how to make the best choices at the grocery store. The best choices that are going to align with a healthy and a nutrient dense diet. You're going to get all sorts of great tips and information today during this session. So get out a pen and paper or open up a Word doc because you're going to want to take notes today. So at Kelly's Choice, we really work to help empower individuals, to invest in yourselves and in your overall wellness in pursuit of living your best lives. And we do that by education. We love to educate you on nutrition, and that is what helps to empower you to make the right choices. All right, so we always like to start out with some fun, fast facts, and they are for this topic. Number one, less than 50% of Americans ages 2 and over meet the dietary guidelines for Americans on added sugar consumption, which is less than 10% of your total daily intake. Portion sizes, we all know, have been expanding since the 70s, but we're still falling short on recommended fruit and vegetable intake. We've always struggled with that. So that's not changed, even though our portion sizes have increased. And then number three, research shows us that organic and conventionally grown produce are equally nutritious. This is an important one, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail in a moment. All right, so grocery shopping. This can be overwhelming, right? Especially when you're trying to make the best choices. Food companies have gotten very creative with labeling and claims based on, what's being talked about in the media, and it can all just be very confusing. So I want to help to simplify this today and clarify some misconceptions. So first off, general rule of thumb, and something I'm sure you've all heard of before, which is you want to shop primarily around the perimeter of the store. The aisles tend to have more of those unhealthy processed foods. So think about, foods with fillers, foods with additives, foods that have added sugars and excess sodium, as well as being less nutrient dense. So shopping around the perimeter can also, bonus, help deter fights with kids. Fewer temptations if the snack aisle is avoided, right? So we're going to start in the produce section. Okay, so we're taking a trip to the grocery store. I want you to visualize yourself in the produce section. Usually that's the first section in front of you when you walk in, right? Remember, we advise that half of the plate should be fruits and vegetables, but you also want to include variety. Okay, so this could be just making a very simple swap, like having a sweet potato every once in a while instead of white potatoes. So you're going to get more vitamin A or beta carotene from a sweet potato than you would a white potato. So making simple swaps can really increase your variety of nutrients, and that's what we're looking for, a variety. I encourage you, explore the numerous fruits and vegetables that are available to you. Eating the same fruits and vegetables regularly can actually leave out important vitamins and minerals. Make a colorful plate. It's more likely that you're going to get the vitamins and minerals and the fiber that your body really needs. So we like to say in the dietitian world to try to eat the rainbow, eat every color of the rainbow every day, or at minimum, try to strive for every week. And that does not include Skittles. When you think of Eat the Rainbow, we're not talking about Skittles, obviously. Okay, so let's take a moment and address a question that I get all of the time, and that is about organic produce. Do I need to buy organic fruits and vegetables? Um, First of all, what is organic? So the criteria for being organic means that that food was produced without artificial fertilizers, without artificial pesticides, hormones, antibiotics. They are free of genetically modified ingredients or genetically modified organisms, which are GMOs for short. And then organic producers have to be inspected and approved by a USDA accredited agency. So they've got a lot of important regulations. They're definitely more expensive to purchase because the farmer and the producers have to pay the agencies for the inspections and all of that. So it's more expensive and they have to pass that price along to us. However, the most important thing here is that you're not getting any significant difference in the nutrient content. So you might be wondering, well, what about the pesticides that they use? So that's a great question. It's a completely kind of a different conversation. But if you are concerned about pesticides or your exposure to those, toxins and pesticides, a good rule of thumb is to, we call it like the clean 15 or the dirty dozen, if you're familiar with that. You can actually check out EWG.org. It's the Environmental Working Group, and they're a really great organization that kind of give you much more informed, detailed resources there at their website. But very simply put, if you are concerned about the pesticides, try to buy those fruits or vegetables that have a thin skin on it that you're going to actually eat, such as an apple. That might be worthwhile to buy organic because you're going to be much more exposed to those pesticides than you would from a fruit with, say, a thicker skin or a rind on it, which won't expose you as much. So, for example, oranges may not really be necessary to purchase organic, whereas the apples, like I said, may be more worthwhile. Now, I don't know the current price comparison, but last time I checked, if you look at the price of an organic apple, they were roughly around almost $3 a pound versus a conventionally produced apple at $1.79 a pound. So much significant difference there in cost, but not so much in the nutrient content. So something important to think about and to understand there. Okay, so we are going to move on into the meat department here. When you're in the meat department, think lean. Okay, you want to select lean ground beef, so like your 90/10 or higher. You want to select lean cuts of beef like sirloin or tenderloin. Anything that ends in the word loin is going to be a leaner cut of meat. And then, of course, your turkey and your chicken breast without the skin on it. So the skin on your poultry is what adds all of that saturated fat. And so that's why we recommend skinless when it comes to your poultry. Also, did you know that after you select your meat at the grocery store, you can bring it right to the butcher counter at the grocery store and they'll actually trim the fat and even portion it out for you? No cost. Isn't that cool? And so, what does meat contribute? We're talking protein, right? This is a source of protein for us. But it's not the only way to incorporate protein in the diet, right? There's also vegetarian sources, which are definitely going to be low in fat. So, great healthy option to get your protein in. So, think about including things like beans and legumes and nuts and seeds. Eggs are also a great source of protein. Of course, not vegetarian, but an excellent source of nutrient dense protein as well. And dried beans and eggs can actually be very cost effective in terms of how much protein you get for the price. Right. Do any of the stores that you shop at have a bulk food section, like the bulk food bins? This is a great place to pick up beans and lentils, spices and herbs, things like that. Beans and lentils, great fiber source, also going to give you calcium. Your nuts, also a great option to buy in bulk. All right, so now we're going to make our way over to the seafood department. Getting enough seafood in the diet is something that you just have to plan for, okay? Um, Many people do not have adequate intakes of fish, especially if you've got kids or teenagers. This is often a food group that gets overlooked. We've got picky eaters, and fish is not typically at the top of the enjoyment list. One fish fillet, FYI, is approximately about 3 to 4 ounces, and that's a good rule of thumb. You want to try to get in like 8 ounces a week. So obviously, that just means that you're going to do 2 4-ounce servings of fish. Sorry, 1 4-ounce serving of fish twice in a week. So you're not having to do, 8 days a week. It just means that you're doing two portions divided twice out of the week. And that's going to help you get in your healthy omega-3 fatty acids that are really important. And we are going to talk about that um, in a couple of minutes. Okay, so as you're increasing your seafood in the diet, it's also important to think about mercury content. So you want to avoid eating seafood that is higher in mercury too frequently, particularly if you're pregnant. So examples of high mercury containing fish is going to be this list here: your swordfish, bluefin shark, orange roughy, big eye tuna, king mackerel. You want to avoid eating these too often. Okay, so since we're on the subject of seafood, we are going to talk about those omega fatty acids next. So, what are these? These are essential in the diet because our bodies cannot produce them on their own, but yet they are needed for many functions in the body. They're a great support to our entire neurological and cardiovascular systems and our brain health. So there's two major groups here of omegas. We've got our omega-3 fatty acids and our omega-6 fatty acids. Now, our omega-3s are going to be found in fatty fish, so salmon, mackerel, tuna, and they're also going to be found in some plant sources, some other sources such as walnuts and flax seeds. Now, they're not as bioavailable. You're going to get less of the omega-3s from the plant-based foods, but that's okay. You're still going to get them. And if you're eating them regularly throughout the week, and then even, the 1 to 2 servings of the fish, you're definitely going to have a good steady flow of omega-3 fatty acids. They're very important for our heart and brain health. Then you've got omega-6 fatty acids. So these are also essential. They mostly come from our plant oils. So think corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, also from our nuts and our seeds, from the natural oils that are occurring in our nuts and seeds. The American Heart Association recommends that at least 5 to 10% of our food calories come from omega-6 fatty acids. Now, this is not difficult to do. The typical US diet has a much higher quantity of the omega-6s compared to the omega-3s. And that's because if you look back, look at the sources, what we just said of the omega-6 fatty acids, those cooking oils, you're going to find that you're using these types of oils on a regular basis. Again, usually when you're cooking. Additionally, they're included in many of our processed foods, crackers, chips. So you're not going to have any trouble getting those essential omega-6 fatty acids in the diet. So for true benefit and health, it's really important to focus on increasing the omega-3 fatty acid intake. That way you get a better balanced ratio there between your threes and your sixes. So again, to get the right amount of omega-3s in the diet, it's not that hard either. You just need to be able to eat fish twice a week. So again, you want to do like that 3 to 4 ounce serving size of fish. So think of for a fish steak, like a salmon steak or tuna steak, that's about the size of a deck of cards. And then if it's a fillet, like a longer, thinner cut of fish, um, I like to give the visual reference of the size of a checkbook. And so that's going to be equivalent to about 3 to 4 ounce serving of fish. So if you're doing that twice a week, then you are meeting your requirement for omega-3 fatty acids. Right. Let's move on to the bakery department. You can actually find the bakery department at the perimeter of most stores. So, and then of course, there's also the bread aisle, which is also going to contain what you are looking for. And I gotta say, this is actually really quite simple. And we have seemed to make it much more complicated than it really needs to be. All you need to do here is look for whole grain products. So the key words to look for on your packaging, 100% whole wheat. The key words that you want to avoid are words such as refined or bleached or enriched. So I challenge you, pick up the loaf of bread that you usually buy. If you're sitting at home right now and you're listening to this as a playback, hit the pause button. Go grab the loaf of bread that you normally buy at the store and take a look at it. Does it have the word wheat on it? Does it also have does it also have 100% on it? The word whole. So if it does not say 100% whole wheat, and you're like, well, the bread is brown, isn't this whole wheat? Well, if it doesn't say that, then your bread is truly just white bread with brown food coloring, I'm sorry to say. You're not getting the benefits that you would get from a whole grain bread, the fiber, the B vitamins. These are things that are actually stripped out of the whole grain during the refinement process. So you want to choose breads that are made from 100% whole grains. Also, you don't want to see the words high fructose corn syrup on there anywhere as well. So let's talk about this a little bit more specifically. A whole grain actually contains, it's the entire grain kernel. So, and we like to kind of talk about the anatomy of a grain, all the different layers of what a whole grain looks like. So, the outer layer is going to be your bran layer. That's your fiber source of the grain. And then you've got a little inner seedling layer, which is the germ. I'm sure many of you have heard of wheat germ. This is where you're going to find your vitamin E, your healthy fats, and other minerals. Those are all really important nutrient dense parts of the grain that we don't want to get rid of. And that's what refining a grain or enriching the grain, that's what it does. It's been processed to remove the bran layer or fiber and the germ layer. And as a result, the grain loses the nutrients that are found in those layers. So then enriched grains are refined. If you see the words enriched grains on the ingredient list, they're actually trying to add some of those nutrients back in that had been lost in the refinement process. But guess what? They're added back in an isolated synthetic form of that nutrient. So it's not the same. It's not as good as getting it intact with the whole grain where it's naturally occurring. So be cautious when reading your food labels. it is really confusing. Grain products, the labels might say wheat, might say multigrain, might say stone ground, but that doesn't mean that it is a whole grain. It might even say that it's made with 100% whole wheat, but check out the ingredient list. Is it the first ingredient or is it the second or the third? Many times it's actually white bread and then, or, enriched and refined bread, but then they add in some whole grains in a smaller volume. Super tricky. Again, look for whole grains in the ingredients. 100% whole, whatever the name of that grain is, whole wheat, whatever. The higher up on the ingredient list, again, the better. So what's the reason that we want to limit the refined grains? What's so wrong about them? The reason that we don't love them too much in the diet is because they can cause blood sugar spikes. So remember that fiber is stripped out, and those natural sugars are going to be absorbed more quickly, causing a quick increase in blood sugar. And then that's usually followed by a quick blood sugar crash. And that's what this slide is explaining right here. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about gluten before we move on to the next department in the grocery store, because gluten follows naturally when we're talking about bakery type items, baked foods and breads, things of that nature, because gluten is a naturally occurring protein that's found in certain grains, our wheat, our barley, and our rye. So you can look for this universal symbol on packaging that you see here. That's going to assist you in identifying products that are certified as gluten-free. And I will say this, unless you are gluten intolerant, you really do not need to purposefully avoid gluten. So if you have a medical condition called celiac disease, then you don't need any explanation here. You understand that that is a medical diagnosis. It's an inflammatory disease of the small intestines. And part of that is that you cannot process gluten. Okay, so it causes an inflammatory response, which can be dangerous. So you for sure need to avoid gluten, but the general population does not need to purposefully avoid it. Gluten-containing foods are typically going to also be foods that are loaded with B vitamins and minerals, fiber, oils that are important for our overall health. So we don't like to cut out such large groups of food for the general population unless it's medically necessary. All right, let's move on into the dairy department. Dairy, another great source of protein, but it can be a significant source of saturated fats as well, just like our meats. So just like the meats, we said we're going to choose lean instead of high fat. The healthy swap here in the dairy section is going to be low fat dairy instead of the higher fat percentage, or instead of the whole milk dairy. So your cost is going to be the exact same, but you're going to get way less saturated fats, and you're going to still get a good amount of protein to meet your needs. Do you have to drink milk? No. Can you get a lot of the nutrients that you get from cow's milk? Can you get that from other places in the diet? Yes, you certainly can. So if you are lactose intolerant and you just cannot tolerate very large quantities of milk or ice cream, well, we're not pushing ice cream here for your dairy, but that is a common source of issue for people that are lactose intolerant, because we usually eat it in a larger amount than we would maybe a glass of milk. And so that's where you tend to find out that you can't tolerate lactose. There's alternatives. We all have seen the plant and nut-based versions of milk, or not milk, as we've started to term it. So soy milk. Great source of protein is in soy milk. Coconut milk, almond milk, the other nut-based milks, those types of milks are fine as an alternative to use if you cannot tolerate the dairy, but just know that it is not going to be a source of protein for you. And then, of course, there's always lactose-free milk as well. So it's pre-digested with an enzyme additive, and that way you don't have as much tummy trouble when you drink it. All right, so sticking with beverages here, moving from milk to other types of beverages, we always suggest water. Water, water, water. It's the best way to hydrate. Sodas, energy, sports drinks, things like that, they are loaded with sugars. They're high in calories because of all these sugars, and they're not providing any nutritional benefit. So just even a 12-ounce can of Coke is going to contribute 140 calories, all from added sugars. That can of Coke alone is going to make up 7% of your total daily calories. Then you haven't even accounted for the amount of added sugars in other items that you may not think about, like your condiments, maybe fruit drinks. It all adds up and it adds up quickly. So you have to be mindful. So, what are some better options for beverages? So, there's the sparkling flavored water. There are, you could just infuse your water at home with some fresh fruit. You can add a splash of juice, just 100% fruit juice, no added sugars. Just add a splash of it. This is a great way to avoid the unnecessary added sugars, but still get that satisfaction of flavor. All right, so moving on into the snack aisle. So for the snacks, you really want to look for snacks that have very minimal ingredients. Simpler is better. Less is more. So for instance, popcorn, it's a whole grain. The ingredients might say, corn, oil, and salt. These are all natural ingredients. You're not getting a bunch of processed fats and sugars and other unnecessary things in the diet. So always look at the ingredient list. Do you know what they are? Do you know what it's going to do for your body or to your body? Is it a filler or is it a real actual food? You should be eating foods that you know what they are, not just a bunch of additives and ingredients that are made in a lab, right? So you want to try to choose snack foods that give you something like fiber. Use snack time if you are doing a snack as an opportunity to get in more fruits or veggies, more vitamins, minerals, that variety of nutrients that we were talking about earlier, or even more fiber in the diet because we are all very short on fiber. So that's a great opportunity to get in a high fiber snack. All right, so now we're in the frozen food section. So what are we doing here? Well, it's always good to have a supply of frozen foods on hand, like fruits and vegetables and seafood. This is a really great way to be able to have foods that you can use to cook a healthy meal um, that don't go bad very quickly as they would in the refrigerator. They can be really nice to have on hand really quickly. Frozen fruits, let's start there. So, frozen fruits, really great to add into smoothies. Also, something like frozen grapes or frozen mango. Really fun and sweet frozen treat to have on hand, especially on a hot day. Frozen berries. These are great. They thaw out fairly quickly and they're really easy to just throw into your cereals or your oatmeal. Frozen vegetables. So, frozen vegetables are great because we know vegetables tend to rot in the refrigerator fairly quickly if you don't get to them. If you get busy, you have good intentions, but the week flies by and there you have, your wilted greens or a zucchini in the back of the fridge that got pushed back there and is just kind of shriveling away. So frozen vegetables are going to stay fresher longer. You can portion out what you need and put the rest back in the freezer. They have the same nutritional value as fresh vegetables. Um, in fact, they're usually frozen right after they're picked, which means they're frozen at their peak level of freshness and ripeness with all the good nutrients intact. So one thing you do want to do is avoid those frozen vegetables and packages that have sauces and marinades and things like that as part of the package because we know that's going to likely contribute to excess sodium and sugars. So just good old plain frozen vegetables. Frozen seafood. Definitely more affordable than fresh and also has the same nutrients. And it's great to throw into a stir fry, a pasta dish, a broil. An idea that's really simple is once your seafood is defrosted, go ahead and put it in the oven, steam some veggies for a side, or you can add to a pasta or rice or quinoa dish. You can even put those frozen fish fillets right into your air fryer that I'm learning everybody under the sun has, except for me. Well, actually, I just ordered one, so I can now join the rest of the club. But yes, you can use frozen items in the air fryer, in a crock pot to make stews and soups, things like that. And then the last thing here we have is frozen treats. You don't have to say no to having a frozen treat once in a while. You just need to be smart more often than not, anyway. So we consider low-fat frozen yogurt or Italian ice and sorbet. This is a better alternative to full-fat, sugar, fat-laden ice cream. Now, it's not necessarily healthy, but it's a better alternative. Again, it's about what you're doing more often than not here. Everything in balance and moderation. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sodium and what to look for. So if you are trying to be mindful of your sodium intake, then you're going to want to pay attention right now because reading and comparing nutrition labels for their sodium content is essential for you. You need to know how to read a nutrition label when it comes to sodium. So, low sodium is going to be considered something that has 140 milligrams or less per serving. Um, for a prepared food item, for the entire meal, shoot for around 5 to 600 milligrams of sodium. There are many brands that offer a lower sodium version than their other, general product. But again, you don't know what that means. When it says lower in sodium, you have to read the label to see what you're actually getting. Another rule of thumb that you could use is when you look at the percentages on the food label, if it says 20% or greater next to sodium, and again, if you're at home watching this, hit the pause button, go grab any type of a canned or packaged boxed food product. And if you eat it frequently, check for the sodium and check all the way to the right of sodium where it says a percentage number. If it's 20% or greater, you know that that is considered a high sodium food. You really want it to be less than 20%. 5% or less indicates a low sodium. So just a couple tricks of the trade here. If you're using regular canned food items, just rinse them before you heat them up and eat them. This is going to greatly reduce the sodium content of that canned food item. So convenience food items, yes, they're very convenient, but there's a price to pay. They're going to always contribute a lot of sodium to the diet, more so than probably what you even would get from your salt shaker alone. Try to choose more whole food. Remember, the perimeter of the stores are going to have the fresh foods that we need in the diet. It's those inside aisles that you're going to find all those packaged processed foods that are naturally going to have more sodium. It's a preservative and it keeps those items on the shelf longer and lasting longer. Use herbs and spices. This can make your foods very flavorful. Vanilla extract, cinnamon, all the different range of herbs, and they're nutrient dense as well. They've got great beneficial compounds to them, so that's a bonus. You can utilize lemon and lime juice. These add a salty flavor to your food, especially like with fish, without actually adding sodium to your food. Citrus juice can enhance the natural flavor of the food. So overall, reducing your intake of processed foods, again, foods found in boxes, frozen entrees, cans, it's going to create a significant decrease in your sodium intake and when you reduce those foods. For example, a single serving of a box of macaroni and cheese can contain 561 milligrams of sodium. Your daily limit is like 1,500 to 2,300. So that kind of puts things into perspective a little bit. You just want to try to choose more of the whole foods and fresh foods more frequently in order to push out the excess sodium in the diet. So, the other nutrient of concern that we briefly mentioned here when we talked about our protein sources, and that's saturated fat. So saturated fats are typically going to be solid at room temperature. They're mainly going to come from animal sources of protein or animal sources in general. So think meat, cheese, dairy, butter, lard, heavy creams, your half and half. Those are all good, significant sources of saturated fats. Saturated fats are dangerous because they increase the risk of heart disease and stroke. So you want to reduce the intake of these types of foods. If you're following that MyPlate method where we talk about the guidelines of having half of your plate being fruits and vegetables, this is a really good way to just naturally push out those foods that are high in saturated fat. If your protein is only taking up a quarter of your plate, then you're naturally going to be reducing your exposure to too much saturated fats. Okay, so we mentioned GMOs earlier when we talked about our produce. And so GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. And so this is a process of genetic engineering that results in the desired traits for that particular food or ingredient. So the goal is to try to change or increase its nutrient composition, or maybe the goal is to try to extend its shelf life. Maybe we are trying to lower the allergenic effects of a certain food. Maybe the goal is helping to resist drought and damage to plants. So so there's a lot of controversy around genetically modified organisms. And I would say on this that I think that there's not a lot of really great evidence to support completely getting rid of them from the diet. And I think that it's a case by case situation. And so that is where I'm going to leave it with GMOs because it can get quite tricky and complicated. So what about water, the importance of water? We cannot talk about nutrition and not mention the importance of hydration. We said this last time, you are what you eat. You are also are what you drink. Water makes up the majority of our body weight. Water is necessary for your body to digest and absorb the vitamins and the minerals and the nutrients that you get from the food that you're eating. It also helps to detoxify the liver and the kidneys. It carries waste away from the body and also helps with really good digestion. Fiber alone, as I mentioned before, I think last week, it cannot aid proper digestion by itself. It actually needs to be in the presence of water. So as you increase fiber in the diet, you also want to increase water in the diet. So important to help with all of these areas right here. If you're dehydrated and you're not getting enough water, your brain has to work much harder. It becomes much more easily fatigued, can lead to headaches and exhaustion very quickly. So get that 8 to 10 8-ounce glasses of water every single day. Okay, so here is your challenge for this upcoming week. Um, we talked about variety in the diet. So I want you to try one of these things. Maybe you have always kept sour cream in the house for taco night. What about swapping out the sour cream, which can be very high in saturated fat and pretty low in protein? What if you substitute that this week and try Greek yogurt instead? Just plain Greek yogurt. It's going to contribute much more protein and way less saturated fats. That's a great healthy swap. Maybe you try and spread avocado on your toast instead of butter. Any of these options here are going to be really great healthy swaps. So pick one and give it a try, and we want to hear from you. Let us know what works for you, what hasn't worked for you. These are my references today. And I just really want to thank you again for your time and your attention, for being here. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. I hope you got some new ideas of things to try, healthy swaps to make. I hope this maybe makes your next grocery store trip a little less challenging, maybe a little bit more fun. And if you are ever interested in meeting one-on-one with a registered dietitian, just getting individualized, um, intervention, feedback, and support, always feel free to reach out. Our office number I will leave with you here. If you are ever interested in speaking with someone about scheduling an appointment, it's 315-710-0080. And you can also check out our website, kellyschoice.org. And thank you again for your time and attention, and we will see you next week. Have a good one, everybody.